to the wisdom flow. Revenue ramp, let's go, let's go. Let's go, let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome to Revrag TV Podcast. I'm your host Ashutosh, and today's episode is one of the best. We are diving deep into the world of GTM and AI for B2B SaaS. Joining us today, Alex, who has seen it all when it comes to AI, SaaS, and B2B GTM strategies with an experience of over 2 decades in GTM consulting. He's a practitioner who's helped companies in multiple countries and helped them transform their strategies with AI and data. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Welcome, and we are very excited to have you here. It would be great if you can give a brief about yourself for the audience sake.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Shitosh, for inviting me. Really appreciate it. And it's always great to talk about this subject. So, just in terms of background on me, so I currently the co-founder and CEO of actually 2 companies. I have one company which is a go-to-market and AI consulting firm, which helps B2B companies mostly build out their AI strategy around their go-to-market team. And then I've got another company which I only just recently started called The Awkward Pig, which is a directory of AI agents specifically designed to help go-to-market teams. So at the moment, it includes AI SDRs, it includes some customer service, sales assistants, and we're slowly increasing it as well.
Makes sense. Thanks for that intro, Alex. What we would like to do now is basically start asking you a lot of questions, right? And we'll keep it conversational as to keep not making it like a interview session. It's like a very normal, candid questions, right? So, Alex, if you can give a brief about like how did you start your career and a little bit background about your like studies and how was your uh like childhood from there, if you can start.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a very interesting question. So I actually grew up kind of like mostly in Europe and Africa, and then I went to university and studied chemical engineering in the UK and then in France as well.
Okay.
But very quickly after that, I moved into consulting. I often describe myself as a recovering consultant. I spent over 20 years in consulting, and I would say maybe the last 13, 14 years of that was in AI go-to-market consulting. So at the time we called it data-driven. But if you add those 13 years to the 7 years that have kind of like followed it, I've been working in AI in B2B go-to-market for probably about 20, which is kind of like a crazy thought, especially given so many people
Right.
think that AI started just with ChatGPT.
No, absolutely. I think that is what most of the people think. But artificial intelligence, a lot of people. So we met Gaurish, who is the founder of Sybil, right? So he was a professor at Harvard and was teaching AI before actually starting his own company. So, and he's been working on AI for a very long time, like you, right? Working and teaching. So people think that it has started recently, which it is not. I think a lot of things have gone into AI so that we are able to like see ChatGPT now. So you've had actually an intense and basically diverse career, Alex, right? From consulting to even having as a like working as an executive and as a leader, and now you're leveraging AI to basically help uh, GTM teams. Can you tell a bit about your career path and how you transitioned into the current role, as in from your earlier engineering days or from your earlier career days of sort?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my career started actually at PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC Consulting, doing traditional, systems integrator, IT consulting type stuff where I was building, and at the time it was all around CRM systems. So I
Right.
worked in the business of basically, implementing CRM systems. The way I think about it, it was really the first wave of digital transformation that was happening
Right.
in go-to-market teams. So I kind of like was there at the beginning. And then I moved to a few other consulting firms. One of them, we focused very much on, if you think about CRM as being sales centric, when I moved to the second one, it felt like we almost kind of started moving into more how do we build out a demand generation and kind of like telesales organization that sits on top of the traditional B2B sales team. So worked with that and kind of figuring out how to implement those types of solutions. Then after that was the age of marketing automation. So I kind of think of that as kind of the precursor to a lot of the SDR solutions that are out there. So, then marketing automation came out, social media out, and it's just continuously evolved, specifically around that automation thing. So to your question around how did I kind of transition between all of those different things? I often think about that exact question. And the thread that kind of like runs through consistently is really just data and technology and figuring out how to make those two things really work for a company. And given my engineering background, the fact
Right.
that that was intrinsic within what I studied, that really gave me the diving board to jump off into this career. And I feel like I've just meandered in and out of different jobs, picking the skills that I enjoyed and learned and applying them almost orthogonally to the next thing. So initially, I was focused on implementing IT solutions, and then I became a consultant for technology companies selling B2B solutions. So, having implemented it, I could then kind of like help them talk about how they sell it.
Right.
There's a lot of just paths like that. Anyway, then I guess kind of like my big career jump probably came about 7 years ago when I jumped out of consulting and joined a startup called Orb Intelligence. What was really cool about Orb Intelligence was that it was basically a data company, but it focused on firmographic data. And specifically, what it did was it had the digital footprint of a company. And what we found was that we just hit a new kind of like change or new wave in B2B go-to-market technology, which was all around predictive analytics, account-based marketing, and intent. And all of them needed this firmographic data of companies coupled with the domain and the IP address to be able
Makes sense.
to effectively activate all of their campaigns. And we rode that wave, and then very, very successful, like doubling every year for the 3 years that I was there. And then we exited and were bought by Dun & Bradstreet. I then spent about three and a half years at Dun & Bradstreet, leading their digital marketing business unit. Ironically, in that business unit, we also had AI products. So when I was in consulting, we were selling AI solutions such as segmentation, propensity modeling, account scoring. And then when I was at Orb, we were selling data to really fuel these AI solutions. And we were using AI ourselves to do things like predict what industry a company was in, or to predict what the domain was associated with a specific company to build integrity within the data that we were selling. And then when I was at Dun & Bradstreet, we also had AI solutions, which was a CDP and an analytics solution that allowed you to analyze your customers and your leads that you were generating and compare them to, basically like build out your ICP and your buyer group analysis. So it was using all of that AI to build all of that. Anyway,
So
after
basically,
that,
just to cover that piece, if I was able to understand, it was like understanding the buying committee through AI. That was the piece that you built in Dun Bradstreet, right?
there was actually
Kind
two
of.
pieces to that. So the first piece was defining the ICP.
Okay.
So, and the ICP is traditionally defined as what industries or what sub-industries companies that you target are, coupled with how big the companies are. And
Right.
then you can append some additional attributes as well, depending on the market that you're going after. So if you're selling technology, often you can look at technographic data. That was actually one of the
Right.
most important things that we did. And so we added technographic data. So you could say, you know what, we're going after companies that have Oracle servers or Cisco networking, or even have a marketing automation platform. And so what you could do is you could start fine tuning your ICP The second thing that we did was we built out the buying group as well. So we analyzed the roles of the individuals that were involved in buying cycles previously, that were doing things like responding to emails, that were coming to the website, that were also involved in the procurement kind of like, process. So building out the entire buy group. And then the third thing was building out AI intent signals as well. Now, some of that we bought in from companies like Bombora or G2 Crowd or Trust Radius, but some of them we built ourselves as well. So you can start building intent signals based on technographics. When they're changing technographics, you can build custom.
Right.
You can also build them based on when people are visiting your website as well. So you use those buying signals to determine where companies are in their buying journey, and that determines how you then engage with them. And with your ICP, your buying group, and you understand where you are in the buying journey, the idea is that then you can just be proactive with enabling them on their buying journey, but at the same time providing support at the timely moments.
Makes sense. No, I think this is very much helpful to understand like what type of technology you were building at Dun& Bradstreet. And kind of I had the similar journey while I was at Slintel and Sixth Sense, right? Trying to build the same systems, technographics, buying committee, intent, a lot of familiar words actually. Yeah. So you were explaining, please complete your thought there.
I think I'd come to the end. I mean, essentially, so at Dun& Bradstreet, we were building those AI solutions. And then, 2-3 years ago, it was about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to leave with this huge wave of technological change. What I find most exciting is that any technological change tends to change go-to-market strategies, as well as the technology that supports those go-to-market teams. And understanding those changes and helping companies adapt to those changes are really the things that really kind of like, get me excited and get me up in the morning.
So that's how you started the Awkward Pig and your consulting firm, right? So like how did it came to you that okay, you need to start the Awkward Pig, the directory of AI agents? When did it occur to you?
So that's a great question. So initially, I was focusing mostly on Etimon AI, which is my consulting and research business, and really working on ad hoc projects, working with CEOs and founders to try and figure out how to implement AI, or at least at the time it was more build a plan around what they wanted to do with AI, but more importantly, put in place the foundational elements so that when AI was mature enough, they could take advantage of it. Things like recording customer phone calls so that you have the transcript of all of your phone calls. We're making sure that your data in your CRM system is accurately tagged so that when you download it and when you use AI to determine your ICP, all of those things work. And then also putting in place some quick wins as well. And one of the quick wins, and this is kind of like how it leads to the Awkward Pig, was really around helping companies get faster at responding to inbound inquiries. That was like one of the real first use cases that people were saying. And you can automate it by just sending out a Calendly link, but sometimes the inbound inquiry, you need to pre-qualify it. Yeah.
Right.
And then what you need to do is you need to understand, are they asking for a meeting or are they asking for more information? And
Makes
the
sense,
use case for asking for more information is a bit like a chatbot. So it was all about how we build a knowledge base of questions they could answer with content and then enable that through AI. And we were building all of these solutions really on a custom basis as more of a POC. Anyway, as I started getting deeper in there, a lot of AI SDRs started popping out. And the moment it really kind of like hit my conscious was when 11x raised, I think it was like 28 million in September, and then in November they raised another 50 million. And suddenly I was like, I sit back and I was like, this is a big trend. And so I started doing more research and publishing more content about AI SDRs specifically. And what I found actually was that there was a real gap in the market around the knowledge of SDRs. And as I think about like a customer buying journey, this is pretty much what I was doing. I was trying to figure out, okay, so what does the universe of AI SDRs look like? And I couldn't find them anywhere. There wasn't really a clear place where I could go and say, okay, there's this category of AI agents. Let me understand what the market looks like. You can go to G2 Crowd and you can look at all the reviews and everything, but even on G2 Crowd, it's very difficult to find that list. So what I thought was, as I'm doing the research, let me just pull together a directory of all the AI SDRs. And that also enabled me to start experimenting with AI coding tools as well. So we built there's two relatively non-technical people who built the awkward pig using Bolt from StackBlitz and Versal and some of these other AI tools. So we wanted to test those out. And then what we did was we wanted to actually build an agent. And this is what we're doing at the moment, is we're building an agent that sits on the back of it that helps us maintain those lists. Because obviously kind of keeping those lists is it's very consuming. It's what we found out within 1 month. And so what we started doing was we basically like built this agent that takes the existing agents that we've got in a list and then searches all of the websites to identify similar companies or similar
Makes sense.
agents that are out there. And then that puts it into a workflow for us to approve or unapprove, publish it into the thing. So we're slowly just kind of like eating our own dog food or drinking our own champagne, depending on the expression that you want, and building out using AI and going through that journey ourselves, because that kind of like gives us the practical experience that allows us to have more authority on talking about this subject. Anyway, so the concept of the awkward pig, the other thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to help buyers on their buyer journey. So as they think about their budget, the challenge they had was around discovery. The other thing that we wanted to avoid was we wanted to avoid going down the route of becoming like a Gartner or a Forrester, where we're publishing these waves. We didn't want to be an analyst group. And there's an expression that they use, which is kind of like, you have to pay to play to be part of these groups. We flipped that expression on its head. And so if you want to be part of the lists on the awkward pig, it's more of a play to pay. So what does that mean? Basically, you can submit your AI SDR, your customer support agent, your sales assistant agent onto our lists. And the more you get people to come and look at the list and the more they vote, the higher you are up on the list. That's the kind of core idea. And so the more you play with us, the more you play with our website, the more benefit you get. So it's a play to pay. That was the core concept.
Yep. Makes sense. I think in today's world, when there are a lot of AI agents popping up left, right, center, right, I think there is there should be a way to basically identify those. I think HubSpot founder is trying to do something there as well. But I think it's a very big market, and you're particularly focusing on AI SDR, which is actually really important for people who are trying to buy into GTM, right? So that there are tools that people tend to buy, and we are
Yeah.
one of the tool in that category. So I think yes. So
Actually, can I go back to that
yeah,
point that you raised about Dharmesh Shah at HubSpot,
Ramesh, yeah.
building out agent AI? One of the challenges I think in the market is people understanding what an agent is. And
Right.
it's actually very confusing, I think, because on one end of the spectrum, you've got, if you think about V0 of ChatGPT, like the first version they released, that was kind of an agent. I mean, it was a chat bot, and you're engaging with an LLM. You could ask it questions, and it would give you responses. So you have those kinds of agents. Then I feel like you've got agents that are kind of like the building block of kind of like the next things, which are when you have one of those chatbots and you add a knowledge base to that or memory to that, and then you also add in tools to that component as well, and maybe some reasoning as well. What that gives you is, I kind of think of it as a tool agent. So if you go onto Agent AI, there are a lot of tool agents that are out there that really just do one function very, very well. So that could be something like research an account, create a meme, customize an email, those kind of things.
Action
Then I feel
oriented.
like you've got another level of agents that are coming where the AI SDRs fit in, which I refer to as persona agents. So these are agents that are designed to be digital workers, but are
Right.
designed to kind of like work very closely and be the companion for a specific role within a go-to-market organization. I've targeted the awkward pig at that level. So it's, so a lot of the agents that sit within the awkward pig, within those tools, they actually have multiple tool agents. So an AI SDR has a research agent. It has a personalization agent that does that. And there are different tools that can like comprise. And then they also have the ability to determine to do the planning and the reasoning around what tools they call when. And then after that, you've got agentic teams. So I kind of think about those four levels of agents with, your core LLM chatbot, your tool agent, your persona agents, and then your agentic teams. And that's the structure that I kind of like think about to help break it down a bit. And where we're focusing at the awkward pig is at that persona level, specifically
No, I
around
think
go
that
to market.
perfectly makes sense. I think you're right. So there are small agents, and even in our system, right, when we are building Revrag, the agents that we have, and I have shown you as well, right? We were discussing that. So there are smaller agents that comprises and make these persona agent or super agent of sort, which basically can perform multiple tasks and complete the outcome that was required when the journey was started, right? And as you said correctly, they are companion to a persona and basically trying to figure out, help them day in, day out. And I think that's a very good description, and good to know that there is a differentiation of sort that you are going after, and there is a niche as such for awkward pig. People can go and basically try and like search for those type of solutions that they are looking for, right? And one more interesting thing that you said at the end was the teams, the digital worker teams that will be getting created, right? So tools and then personas, and then there will be teams, right? So I think, yeah, absolutely. So before we go to much more deeper, I really want to go in more deep into AI agents and AI solutions, right? I would like to understand, like you have been doing GTM across multiple countries as well, right? And like, how have you seen the GTM getting transformed from these countries, different markets, and from your time when you were doing like, because you have seen the cloud era, the CRM, the marketing automation, and lots more, right? And now AI. So how do you think the GTM has evolved? And if you can cut pieces into like different country strategy
Yeah.
as well, that would be really amazing for us.
Yeah. So let me start now. What I think now is that working with international companies is a bit more boring than it was like 20 years ago. What I find now is that a lot of, I'll call it kind of like cultural business differences have tended to blend and move towards US standards. The US, the way the US does business, the way they talk about things, the language they use, the philosophy and the methodologies has tended towards just the default US way of doing things. I think a lot of that has been enabled by social media. And so, you look at LinkedIn, everyone's on there sharing ideas, and you can see that with the ability to do calls, everyone can sell into any country from any country.
Makes
So the barriers have broken down a lot more. That said, there are still nuances when you're doing business with people in different countries, specifically around culture and sometimes language as well. I'll give you an example. So if I'm working with people in the UK versus in the US versus in India, everyone speaks English,
right.
but the words I use will be slightly different to do that. So culture's one thing. The other thing is the tactics around the go-to-market are also different in each
Okay.
country. And that could be anything from the kind of like the physical infrastructure. So the distribution mechanisms. If you're selling a server, like who are the resellers? What's the relationship between the distributors, the resellers, and the vendors? If you're talking about physical goods, like those are very different, and they're still very different in each country. You then have social media channels and the marketing channels. Those are still very different as well in each country. So, LinkedIn tends to be more or less the default, certainly in Western Europe, increasingly in India. But if you start thinking about, let's say, Facebook or Instagram or kind of like more B2C go-to-market channels, they're very different in all of the different countries. And how you do your marketing is very different as well. So mostly, I think the differences that still exist are distribution and kind of like physical, like, what the ecosystem looks like in each country.
Uh,
The second thing is marketing and how you think about marketing. Different messages resonate with people from different countries. It's very interesting. And then the third one, building on that, is culture. Just talking about that as I was saying that, I remember first going to India and also to China in the early 2000s. And both countries just exhibited a level of entrepreneurship that I saw within the people that I spoke to. Even then, like, almost 20 years ago, that I didn't feel I had when I was living in the UK. And it was very striking to me. So there's an element of kind of cultural risk taking, if I can kind of like call it that, and the drive and desire to kind of like be a self-starter, an entrepreneur, start a business, those sort of things, all very different. But like I said, unfortunately now it's all kind of like blending towards more of the US model, which is good in some ways, but it's a bit less glamorous. It's a bit less exciting for me.
But you, as you're saying, so anybody from any country can basically sell internationally, and that is the way that you're saying. So from what you were saying is during those 20 years that in GTM, earlier it was country based and different strategies used to be there for each of the countries, but now it is coming together and becoming one, which is a US based strategy which can work around the world and internationally and globally. There are set standards per se that are becoming, and now that era is changing into generative AI, right? And AI agents being coming. So which is the area that you think is not yet uh, touched upon in GTM, and we are still scratching the surface of that piece. We haven't gone very much into detail in basically solving GTM through Gen AI or AI agents.
So first thing, let me add on to the previous question something that as you were summarizing it, I realized was also another major difference, which is time zones as well. So a lot of global companies, and you feel it more than most because I know it's late for you at the moment, and it's early for me. But what you find also is that a lot of companies organize essentially based on kind of like the three major thirds of time zones. So you've got like Asia, Pacific, and Australia. You've got Europe and Africa, and then you've got the Americas. So teams tend to be kind of like, organized in those ways. But going back to your last question, kind of like where is the AI opportunity in kind of like sales and marketing? Where are the changes? I have a kind of like a framework that I use to determine where opportunities exist for AI. And there's really two dimensions. There's one dimension which is, I refer to it as knowledge. So it's basically it's how much data you have about a specific activity or task, or increasingly, because you can use prompting now, it's also how much just knowledge individuals have about a business to be able to build a prompt. So one dimension is knowledge. And obviously, the more knowledge you have, the more opportunity there is for AI. The other dimension is risk, which is how much risk is there with AI getting something wrong. It's almost kind of like a
Makes
double
sense. Yeah.
negative. But where you have low risk and high knowledge, that's basically that's where AI works best. Okay. Where you have high risk and a lot of knowledge, I think AI can still work there, but it's more of a co-pilot or assistant type model that you need to lean on. Where you've got low knowledge and low risk, that's actually an opportunity for you to gather more knowledge and data to learn more, and then you can automate it with AI. And then, like, you've got low knowledge and also high risk. That's where you need people doing it. So I kind of have that macro framework that I think about. Within GTM teams, how I break that down is on the risk side of things, so kind of like along the
Right.
horizontal axis, really the higher up you are in the funnel, the less risk there is. So marketing, if you look at marketing and account-based marketing specifically, you know from your time at Sixth Sense, AI has been in marketing for a good 10, maybe even 15 years. Programmatic advertising is all, the AI basically engine
Absolutely.
that sits behind it that's constantly optimizing your campaigns. When you set up a campaign, you put in the guardrails for the campaign, you put in your budget, you put in your audience, you put in your creative, and then you just press play and it just runs for you. And it just optimizes, it's constantly optimizing the campaign. So up in the top of the funnel, up in marketing, I feel AI has been, like it's there, it's working. As we go down, AI is just being used more and more the lower down the funnel. So the middle of the funnel, I kind of think of AI SDRs as really sitting in the middle of the funnel. That's the next area where I think AI is also going to, start impacting, roles and things like that. And then as you go to sales, I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI at the sales level, at the opportunity level of the funnel. But I don't, we're not ready to have that on autopilot mode at the moment. So that's
Yeah.
really in assistant mode for specific functions within sales. So for example, account planning, doing the research on accounts and building an account plan. That's something that a lot of teams are doing. Using AI to analyze calls and basically help you more as an AI coach to help you learn and improve your calls and also analyze your previous calls. And that kind of
Makes
like
sense. Yeah.
ties into another one, which is revenue intelligence. So if you look at companies like Gong or Clary, they do a lot of this where they analyze your email communications, your Zoom calls. They'll analyze also your maybe even text messages. And based on that information and the information that you communicated with the client, they'll determine what stage, not necessarily what stage, but what the probability is of an opportunity closing and also the deal size. And that allows you to better forecast. And then the final thing from an acquisition funnel perspective is the operations. So RevOps, just in general, getting all of the data tied together, making sure that the CRM is up to date, and all of those sort of details are all up to date is, really, really important. AI, I can see doing a lot more there. But just generally, the focus areas tend to be right at the top of the funnel, working their way down. As the risk gets higher, the level of AI adoption is less and less. The other area is kind of like, if I think of a funnel as being a bow tie. So you've got a funnel kind of like going down to the close, and then you've got post sales, which is implementation, customer success, upsell, cross sell, all of those functions, kind of like being a reverse funnel on the back end. That again, I think with customer success, I think that's also a huge area for AI. So marketing, not
Makes sense.
fully done, but AI is great there. As you go down this to the sales funnel,
But it's there.
it's there, but it's there's a lot more risk associated with all of the activities. So you can't just step back and let AI
So
run wild.
it will be kind of co-pilot, not majorly autopilot. And you're saying that the major things that might happen in the coming days will be in the SDR layer, which you are saying because it is top of the funnel and majorly not yet automated. Marketing was there, and there has been a lot of things that have been done in marketing, but now the part of the top tofu is where we basically will start seeing a lot of and we are just scratching the surface as you were saying,
100%.
right? And then
Think of
going down.
I think of AI SDRs as being the first go-to-market tool that is experimenting with being properly agentic. And I don't think we're there yet. I think there are a lot of, I think where we are at the moment is we're basically, we have a lot of SaaS platforms that
Right.
have AI built into them and that use AI tools. They're not really,
Fully
um,
autonomous.
yeah, they're not fully autonomous. And I think the other component that's also important is they have quite a thick data layer as well. So instead of just interacting with the different data layers that sit in the CRM system, the marketing automation platform, web traffic as well on your website, instead of picking those data as you need it, they're keeping the data in their own database, which is kind of like it's a very SaaSy kind of like approach to building a solution, as opposed to necessarily having kind of like more of a vector-based knowledge graph or like knowledge base of what the activities are and doing that. And so I think there's opportunity to evolve the form factor of it, but I also think there's very specific areas where I think AI SDRs, we're going to see a lot of improvement. I think the first bit is around building out the ICP and building out the messaging associated with the various segments that you're targeting. And associated with that, I think building more of a feedback loop to learn and improve. I think that's going to be something that's important. I think also a type of A/B experimentation so that you can test different ICPs, learn from them, and then fine tune your messaging. I think I can see a lot of development there. And I can see a lot of improvement around the web research, how they use external data sources and online real-time research, how they combine those two together to then personalize. And I actually prefer the word contextualize an outreach, because it's not about getting the name right. It's not about getting like, the fact that someone posted about something correct. It's about contextualizing the value proposition of the company to a potential customer and making it clear why there is a very unique value proposition. I think that's really the contextualization and where the outreach needs to kind of get to. And then the final thing is, I think, just multi-channel. I think email response rates are on the decline. I actually think sending less emails would be my ideal future state of an AI SDR, because I think that will start increasing the number of emails that are open, but also using LinkedIn social media channels, using, I think, programmatic advertising as well. I can see that being in the control of an SDR to enable nurturing specific accounts that they're targeting with specific messages, and building all of that into one hub, which is user centric and has a good user experience, I think is where we're going. But at the moment, I feel there's a lot of companies that are figuring all of this out. And then the other side of it is there are a lot of customers that are also figuring this out. So you've got these two different components that are adapting, changing, experimenting. And when everything kind of works, we'll get to where we need to get to.
Makes sense, makes sense. So I have a different question per se, as in not related to kind of B2B selling, it's more sort of like B2C selling, right? So there is voice AI as well, right?
Yeah.
It has been there, like there are people actually trying AI calling per se. So where do you think like it will sit? Is it too early in the game? You might have heard a lot of calls happening. Where do you see that going? And will it be getting adopted by the companies, bigger companies? What do you think there?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think where we are at the moment is a lot of tools that have had limited success in that space have personalized what I think of as kind of like almost voice messages, and are sending kind of like a voice file to some kind of like destination so that people can then consume it when they want. And I think that's had kind of, limited success. But the actual idea of, and then the other side of it is you also have you have dialers as well, an AI dialing technology that's a bit like the email scheduling technology that's enabling and optimizing who you're connecting with based on your target account list. Now, when those two come together, well, actually, first, let me say, I think one of the challenges at the moment is the speed of the inference. So the ability to take voice, turn it to text, process it, and then generate text and then generate voice back. That loop that's happening just takes a bit too long for it to work in conversation over the internet. Okay. So I think there's a bit of technology that needs to happen before it can really be good. That said, I can see it being implemented again at the top of the funnel because that's where there's lower risk and people doing experimentation at the top of the funnel. So I can see voice SDRs, 11x, that's what 11x are doing at the moment. I can also see at a sales level having I'll call it like a live sales co-pilot. At the moment, with a lot of these tools, they have like a running commentary of things that you should talk about and stuff. What I could see is I could see an AI SDR where, let's say a salesperson is on a call and they want to get a quote there and then of a price. They could literally say, hey, I'll call the person Siri, for example. Siri, what would be the range of prices for this specific use case? That could be automated now. I think we're still a long way off from having salespeople being automated as well. Maybe some inbound inquiries, I could see that. But again, top of the funnel.
That makes sense. I think I like the framework that you use, the low risk and then the high risk. So the graph that you were mentioning, right? I think you're apt there. So companies are actually trying to use voice AI that I have been in talks with and basically using them where low risk is,
Yeah.
right? And with the volume as well, because it makes sense for companies to use it over volume. And I think yes, still early in terms of latency there, but it is catching up really, really very fast actually. So I have a different question. We'll switch gears now.
Yeah.
We've uh we've like gone into very deep into AI. Now we'll come back and I want to know if, let's say, you want to advise a founder, or you are starting a company today, how will you look at a GTM, right? Overall, as a founder of a company, and you, let's say, are building an agentic AI company or a SaaS company, how would you look at solving your GTM?
So I think that's a really good question. I very early in my career, the CEO of the company of the consulting firm that I used to work for used to have this phrase, which was vendors don't choose channels, customers choose channels. And it goes back to you need to really understand to build your go-to-market team. You need to understand how buyers learn, shop, and buy for your solution. And you need to have a going in hypothesis around this. So, right up at the top end of the funnel, you see a lot of people posting on LinkedIn about their solutions. And you see a lot of people not posting on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's a personality thing, but sometimes it's because the target audience that they're targeting don't engage on LinkedIn. I can think of, let's say, developers. They don't use LinkedIn very much. So, people in, let's say, doctors, if you're selling to the medical industry, again, LinkedIn isn't a very good channel. So you need to understand, who your ICP is and how they buy. And that also includes an element of understanding how you're going to price your product as well. So if you've got a price which is, let's say, less than 10K a year, that's maybe something that an individual can buy. Maybe it's a bit on the pricey side, but maybe 1K a year, that's an individual. As soon as you start going above K, 100K, you start looking at buyer committees. Depending on how your target audience goes through the learn, shop, buy process and who are the personas, what you want to do is you want to build a sales team or a go-to-market team that mirrors that approach. And with that also, understanding what's the data that you can use to help drive that. So how do you find out that someone's starting their journey, like looking to buy or looking to solve a specific problem? Maybe you use Bombora data to get intent. Maybe, they start looking on G2 Crowd. Maybe you look at your website. Maybe there's another trigger, which is like a new person gets hired into a company, or they adopt a new type of technology or something like that. So you need to have like a going in hypothesis of how a buyer goes through that stage. And then the aim is to figure out how to build a go-to-market team that mimics that and allows you to execute against that hypothesis. And you talked a bit about how do you build a team. What I think is happening now is very different to what was happening 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, what would happen is you would, first it would be founder-led sales, and then you would start maybe having someone in marketing and then someone in sales, maybe even a sales engineer if you had if you were selling a technical solution, and you'd have like those three people, and then slowly build out your teams associated with that. What I think is happening now is a bit different. I think what's happening is that initially you go through the founder-led sales process, which is essentially trying to find your product market fit and validating some of your hypotheses around how you educate buyers, how you make sure that you're on the consideration list for them, and then how do you kind of like close a deal. The second stage now is how do you automate those things? How do you build in AI and AI, where do you plug in an AI SDR? Where do you plug in, how do you automate this so that you can be founder-led or at least have one person covering the entire buying journey for as long as possible? And having this philosophy now of where do you put in AI, I think is something that I see a lot of companies not necessarily being successful with, but starting to experiment with and having that philosophy around how you build out that go-to-market team. And and then once you're of a certain size, then it's the customer success team and the post-sales team that's critical. But it kind of depends on you go to market as well. I'll give you another example of a company. So one of the companies I consult for is basically has a double funnel sales process. So first they sell into a company, and then they sell the benefits to the employees. And then only when the employees use those benefits do they then get revenue. So they first have a funnel to sell into a company, then they have another funnel to basically get the employees to adopt a specific solution. How they've built their team mimics that buying process. So they have a team for account acquisition, then they've got a team for driving adoption as well. So it's a lot of that sort of philosophy that I would use. But now what is different is I use a lot more AI technology and more of a kind of like focus on automation and how do you automate a lot of it.
Makes sense. I think the last example that you gave is very interesting. I think can be something like a insurance company of sort can work really good for those type of companies, I guess, right? So absolutely, I think selling to a company and then selling to their employees, it's a great to land and expand. Very nice. So I think we are about time, but I have a question about which is a very interesting question. I wanted to ask you last time when we were discussing, you also mentioned that there will be layers of AI agents that would be coming in, right? So you said that this generation one of AI agents, there will be other generations that will be coming up, right? So let's say if in the ideal world, you get to choose how you can design your AI agent
Yeah.
for a GTM, for your GTM, let's say, what would be that agent that you can design?
Okay. So I would approach it completely differently to how AI agents are being designed at the moment. The biggest challenge that I see with AI agents at the moment, and this would be the same if I was like, let's say, running a company and building an AI agent in-house, it would be exactly the same. The biggest challenge is adoption. Okay. It's how do you get users and business leaders to adopt solutions? And core to that is trust. Do they trust the AI to do what they need to do? And so if I look at a lot of AI companies at the moment, they lead with AI. Like we are an innovative company. We're doing cool stuff. We're using AI. If there's one thing that I've learned from selling AI for the last 20 years is that AI doesn't sell. AI as a solution doesn't sell. What sells in a B2B context is actually more around de-risking solutions and a value proposition around the benefits and the solutions, and actually hiding as much of the AI as you can. What I think is a lot of AI companies at the moment are stuck between two different objectives. One is raise money and work with your VCs. To do that, you need to talk about AI. You need to go to market with AI. But to be successful with your end customers, you need to focus on adoption, building trust, and actually hiding the AI. I actually saw just this morning on my LinkedIn feed, I saw a study that I just glimpsed at, but the key takeaway from the study was that end customers aren't willing to basically like pay more for AI solutions. So, going to market with an AI value proposition doesn't help, essentially. So what I would do is I would completely like shift the script and start from an adoption and trust perspective. I would hide a lot of the AI behind the scenes and almost just kind of like hide it. Then from a technology perspective, there's other things that I would do. I think we talked about some of those things, specifically
Yeah.
with AI SDRs. But for me, the key thing is the philosophy of how you build the solution. I think at the moment, there's a lot of challenge with, and this is what I see with my clients as well. I sometimes say that AI has got a last mile problem. Okay. And that last mile is user adoption. Like the technology is great, but then it goes into a company and it stutters and stagnates. And a lot of it is because it comes in with this adversarial kind of like, conversation, which is we are taking your jobs away almost, and so people
Yeah,
are
I think that
scared.
you're right.
People then also aren't technical. So when they're engaging with AI, they don't understand how much they can trust the recommendations. We often forget that we're technology people and we understand the technology and we trust it. But when you are looking at the average user, they think it's scary and intimidating. They think that it's threatening. All of those emotions, I think, don't help with the products going to market at the moment. So my personal belief is that I think the solutions that we're going to start seeing in the future start hiding the AI technology. I'll give you another example here. This drives me crazy actually. So when you go to ChatGPT, you can choose which model you use. There's like GPT-4, there's 4.0, there's 4.0 mini, there's O1, there's O1 mini, there's like now there's operator. Like, what do those mean? Yeah. Like to the
Yeah.
average user, like, do they know when to use one versus the other? Those types of decisions need to be taken out of the hands of the users. The AI systems need to understand what is best, and the less AI that's exposed, I think, the better.
Makes sense. I think you're right. And then you rightly said last time as well. I think this is the first generation, and we are figuring out how actually we as a user will use this kind of technology to get more benefits out of it. And actually, the first generation of AI agents, how they will perform. There will be multiple generations that will be coming in, right? So I'm glad I had this conversation, Alex. Thanks so much for joining in, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you here. Fully insightful session, and we'll have another one when we have Generation 2 AI agents
Yeah.
coming in.
Well, listen, Ashutosh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people that are actually building the solutions that are on the frontier of, what people will be using and trying to solve these problems. I've just got so much huge admiration for people that are actually on that front line doing this, experimenting, trying it out, and trying to make businesses out of it. To be able to chat with you is also a pleasure. So thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure, and thanks so much for coming in. Thank you. So, if let's say our listeners want to reach out to you, where they can reach out and how they can get connected to you.
Great. Yeah. Easiest thing is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is easy. But similarly, if you want to connect to me on Twitter as well or X, my handle is Alex Southworth. Really simple. But yeah, or you can come to Etamon AI and reach me on my website as well. So
Thank you, Alex.
excellent. Thank you very much, Ashutosh.
Yeah. Late night dreams on the revenue ramp. Talking cash flow and sales stamps. Got Revrag